He wasn't a suspect. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't even angry. He was wearing a pressed white shirt, seatbelt on, driving 5 miles under the speed limit. And still, he didn't make it home. Elijah Merrick was a state auditor with a quiet voice and a quiet life. He didn't carry signs at protests. He didn't tweet political takes. He believed in systems until one of them took him out. It started with a routine traffic stop in a quiet suburb. No high-speed chase, no weapons drawn, just a black man driving a black Lexus on a sunny evening with his fiancée and her 4-year-old daughter in the back seat. A small family on their way to get pizza. But what unfolded next was broadcast to the world in real time. Clara had her phone recording before the officer even reached the window. Not because she expected trouble, but because she'd lived long enough to understand the weight of precaution. And then came the phrase every licensed black gun owner is trained to say, "Slow. Clear. Calm, officer. I do have a registered firearm. I'm licensed. It's holstered. I'm not reaching for it. It was the truth. It should have been enough." But within seconds, the car exploded into shouts, glass, and gunfire. 3 shots, one through the shoulder, one to the chest, one missed. Elijah's blood soaked into the seat, right beside his briefcase inside. Documents from an ongoing investigation into police misconduct and misuse of funds. The department he was investigating. The same one that had just opened fire on him. The live stream didn't stop. Clara's voice cracked, but she kept filming. Her daughter screamed in the back, and millions of viewers saw the reality too many families know too well, a police shooting. Caught on camera, and a man who had followed every rule still ended up bleeding out in front of his loved ones. But here's what no one expected. Elijah wasn't just a victim. He was the person auditing that very police department. He was the one who'd requested body cam records, stop and search data, and internal payment logs tied to officer bonuses for high stop counts. In short, he was digging into the very culture that just ended his life. And the officer, he had no idea, no clue that the man he pulled the trigger on was the one the governor's office trusted to uncover racial profiling and corruption inside the force. No idea that the video would go viral. No idea that this case would become the catalyst for statewide police reform. This isn't just about one stop. It's about who gets to walk away and who gets remembered. This is the story of Elijah Merrick. And it's only just beginning. The sun dipped low over Riverview as Elijah Merrick pulled out of the community lot, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near his briefcase. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. The day was done. His report printed, filed, and quietly placed in the brown leather case beside him, in the back seat. Nia hummed something soft while clutching her favorite plastic tiara. Clara, in the passenger seat, adjusted the radio and smiled at him. They were headed for pizza, something simple to end a long week. A moment of peace before Monday's meetings, before deadlines, before more data. But none of them would make it to the restaurant. A squad car appeared behind them 2 blocks after they turned off Highway 6. The lights came on quickly. No siren. Just the pulse of red and blue flashing off the glass. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. Clara glanced at the mirror. "We weren't speeding," she said, but her hand was already moving, unlocking her phone, opening the camera. Elijah calmly pulled to the side. "It's probably a tail light," he said. He wasn't wrong. But that wouldn't matter. Officer Travis Brenner watched the Lexus coast to a stop. From inside his cruiser, The scene looked typical nice car, clean plates, no erratic driving, but his gut buzzed. A bolo had gone out 2 days ago. Vague description. Suspected robbery getaway vehicle. A black sedan. That was enough for suspicion. And for him, suspicion was action. He approached the car with his hand resting near his holster. His steps were firm. His flashlight clicked on. Elijah rolled down the window before the officer spoke. "Good evening," he said politely. "May I ask the reason for the stop?" Brenner didn't answer the question directly. "Your brake light's out," he said instead. "License and registration." Elijah nodded, moved his right hand slowly toward the glove compartment. Clara was recording now. Not dramatically, not out of anger, just in case. Then came the sentence, delivered with perfect calm. No sudden movement, and both hands still visible. "Officer, before I reach, I need to inform you that I have a registered firearm on my right hip. I'm licensed. I am not reaching for it." That should have been it. That should have signaled training, responsibility, caution. But all Brenner heard was the word firearm. And he reacted. "Do not move," he yelled. His voice rose instantly, louder than the situation demanded. Elijah froze. "Sir." "I am not reaching," Clara shouted. "He's not touching it," but her words were buried beneath the panic. Brenner drew his weapon. It happened fast. 3 shots. Close range. 2 striking Elijah. 1 missing. The driver slumped forward. Clara screamed. Naya cried out from the back. The phone shook, capturing it all, every sound, every scream, every second. The screen tilted toward Elijah, his white shirt now stained red. The briefcase tipped over, papers spilling onto the floor. Clara shouted again. He told you he had a permit." Brenner backed up, gun still raised. His voice cracked as he called for backup. He had no idea what he'd just done. Not yet. Another cruiser arrived within minutes. EMTs followed. Clara refused to let go of Elijah's hand. Her camera was still rolling, still live. Her voice didn't crack this time. It hardened. "You shot a good man. You shot the wrong man." By the time they reached the hospital, the video had already crossed 20,000 views. Headlines hadn't broken yet. Names hadn't been released. But the footage was real clear, unedited, emotionally raw. It showed a man complying, a woman begging, a child screaming, and a trigger pulled anyway. A traffic stop turned deadly, a police shooting caught on camera, and now, a nation watching closely. In the ER, Elijah's ID was checked. His credentials were verified, and the discovery spread through official channels like wildfire. He wasn't just any driver. He wasn't a suspect. He was a government official, a state auditor, assigned to review financial and procedural irregularities inside the Riverview Police Department, the same department that had just taken his life. Chief Dana Voss was alerted within the hour. She stared at the report that had landed on her desk 3 days earlier, flagged urgent. Attached was Elijah's name, his request for data, his internal review schedule. Her heart sank. This wasn't just another case. This was a disaster, and one the world had already started to see unfold in real time. But back on the scene, Officer Brenner still didn't know. He sat in the back of his cruiser, palms on his knees, eyes locked forward. A fellow officer tried to talk him through protocol. "You followed procedure," they said. But Brenner didn't answer. Deep down, he felt something had gone wrong more than just a misread. This wasn't about danger. It was about fear. And fear had pulled the trigger. Clara left the hospital alone that night. Naya slept in her lap in the back of her sister's car. The news was already running clips of the video, blurred for privacy, but unmistakable. Social media lit up. Activists, lawyers, ordinary citizens, all asking the same thing: how many licensed black men had to announce their legal status just to be met with bullets. And in a locked room inside the hospital, a nurse quietly zipped up the remains of Elijah Merrick. His wallet, phone, and badge placed neatly in a plastic bag. His briefcase, recovered at the scene, closed but stained. Inside were the words he had hoped would spark change. Ironically, it would be his death, not his report, that would finally bring it. The morning after the shooting, the town of Riverview woke up to a storm that wasn't in the forecast. Phones buzzed nonstop. Local headlines read like breaking national news. And one question echoed louder than the rest: who exactly was the man shot in that car? At first, the police department released a basic statement: an officer-involved shooting during a traffic stop. Driver deceased. Incident under review. It sounded like something cut and pasted from every incident before. No names, no apology, no urgency. But within hours, that vague sentence collapsed under the weight of one undeniable truth. Elijah Merrick was not only a government official, he was the lead state auditor assigned to investigate police misconduct in small to mid-sized departments across the state. His latest assignment, the Riverview Police Department. And that assignment was not random. His office had been quietly collecting complaints, reviewing stop and search data, and pulling internal payroll records connected to traffic stop incentives. The early findings were troubling, especially in the way officers were rewarded for productive stops, a coded phrase that often translated to racial profiling. Elijah had flagged the department just weeks prior. Now, the same department had taken his life. By noon, Clara's live stream had reached over 2 million views. It wasn't just the gunshots that shook people. It was the calm in Elijah's voice, the clarity of his words, the heartbreaking irony of a man trained to find systemic failures, only to be swallowed by one. Governor Ellen Stafford called an emergency press conference. Standing before the state seal, her voice didn't waver. "What happened to Merrick demands full transparency," she said. "He was one of ours. And more than that, he was trying to fix what was broken." Behind her stood state attorney generals, civil rights leaders, and 3 members of the state audit board. Visibly shaken. It was no longer just about a traffic stop gone wrong. It was about a system that silenced the very people trying to hold it accountable. Inside the Riverview precinct, panic turned to silence. Chief Dana Voss ordered an immediate internal lockdown. All body cam footage, dashboard video, radio transcripts, everything was pulled. She'd known about Elijah's review. He had emailed her personally requesting access to officer bonus logs and vehicle stop frequency reports. She remembered glancing at it, flagging it for later. She hadn't expected that later would come like this. Officer Brenner was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. His statement to Internal Affairs was brief. He claimed he feared for his life, said he misunderstood Elijah's movement, never heard the full sentence about the licensed firearm. His legal counsel told him not to speak further, but the damage was already done. News outlets uncovered more than just Elijah's role. They published portions of his report in progress charts, showing disproportionate stops of black drivers, questionable expense reports tied to vehicle check bonuses, and emails from officers using phrases like "go fishing on the east side," referring to patrol routes through majority black neighborhoods. Social media turned Elijah into more than a victim. He became a symbol. #spread. Justice for Elijah. Audit the police. He was doing his job. Activists rallied, not just to mourn, but to demand that his work not die with him. Protesters gathered outside Riverview City Hall. Some held signs with Elijah's smiling photo beneath bold words. He tried to fix it. They ended him instead. Clara, still reeling from the night before, released a short statement. She didn't cry on camera. She didn't rage. She said one line that the public wouldn't forget. He didn't just follow the law. He believed in it. And still, it didn't protect him. Meanwhile, Elijah's co-workers at the state auditor's office went public. They confirmed that he had submitted a preliminary report 2 days before his death. The file was under review when the shooting occurred. The office promised to release it in full. It became clear that Elijah had been too close to proving something. A pattern, a payout structure, a culture of metrics over morality. Body cam footage from Officer Brenner was released 2 days later. The footage supported Clara's video. Elijah announced his firearm legally. He moved slowly. He never reached. The firearm remained holstered. The officer gave no clear command before shooting. Public outrage soared. Commentators across the country asked the same question: if a man who does everything right, who warns, who complies, who holds a government badge, can still be shot, what chance does anyone else have? Civil rights organizations demanded a federal review of Riverview's police practices. The ACLU called for a ban on traffic stop incentives. Elijah's story was now at the center of a national debate on how data, fear, and prejudice intersect at deadly speed. But inside all the noise, there was one fact that no press release could erase. Elijah had gone to that neighborhood not as a stranger, but as an overseer. He wasn't there to run. He wasn't hiding anything. He was the one asking the questions, and for that, he was met with bullets instead of answers. As vigils lit up across the state, candles glowing under framed photos of a man most had never met. The irony cut deeper. Elijah had believed systems could be better. He believed reform came from inside, from facts, from evidence. And yet, even with a badge, even with a briefcase full of data, even with every protocol followed, he never stood a chance once someone saw his skin before his title. This wasn't just about what happened. It was about who it happened to and why that mattered. Because Elijah wasn't another number. He was the one trying to stop the numbers from stacking up in the first place. The world had seen the video. They had watched Elijah's final moments not through a security camera or a courtroom sketch, but through the shaking lens of Clara's phone. No edits, no narration, just raw truth, streaming live. And yet, until that moment, Clara herself hadn't spoken for days. She stayed silent, tucked away from cameras, shielding her daughter from the noise outside. But silence can't protect you from the weight inside. And so, when the press requested a statement, she didn't send lawyers. She didn't post a tweet. She walked into a church packed with people, stepped behind the podium, and let the world hear her the way Elijah would have wanted, unfiltered, precise, and calm. She didn't open with anger. She didn't even mention the officer's name. She opened with Elijah's. He was a state auditor. He worked late, double-checked everything, and brought his lunch from home every day. He believed that if you followed the rules, you deserved safety. But that didn't save him. The room was silent. No cameras flashed. No one coughed. Clara continued. He told that officer he was licensed. He announced it because he was trained to say it. And the officer still shot him. With a child in the back seat. With a phone recording. With no reason but fear. Then she paused, her hand resting gently on the edge of the podium. And I need to ask you something. If a government official, with a badge, with credentials, who did everything right if he can't survive a traffic stop, who can? That line spread like fire. Within hours, it was clipped, quoted, shared across every platform. On cable news, civil rights leaders replayed her speech as proof of a system cracking. On social media, the clip trended under tags like Clara Speaks, Reform Now, and he did everything right. But Clara didn't stop there. She filed a formal request for all records linked to Elijah's audit, demanding they be made public. She contacted lawmakers, civil rights attorneys, and the governor's office directly. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for sunlight. She asked that every report Elijah touched be reviewed by an independent panel. And to the shock of many, the governor agreed. Days later, a coalition was formed, the Merrick Transparency Task Force, with powers to subpoena officer records, review department training policies, and examine all traffic stop incentives used in the past 5 years. Clara didn't just speak. She changed the story's direction. But even as the narrative grew, even as media coverage surged, Clara made sure the message stayed personal. She went back to the live stream and watched it again, alone, not because she needed to relive it, but because she refused to let it be reduced to a headline. She remembered every breath, every word Elijah said. "Officer, I'm licensed. I'm not reaching." That line looped in her mind like a broken prayer. She began speaking at vigils, at universities, at city halls. She stood beside mothers who had lost sons, women who had lost brothers, communities that had lost trust. Each time, she brought the same message. This is not about hating the police. This is about building a police force that doesn't see my daughter as a future threat. The power of her words wasn't just in their pain, it was in their precision. Clara wasn't just grieving, she was organizing. Within weeks, she helped draft what would become the Merrick Accountability Act, a proposed bill aimed at banning performance-based traffic stop bonuses, requiring independent review for officer-involved shootings, and making all body cam footage automatically public within 72 hours of any lethal use of force. The bill hadn't passed yet, but it sparked something. Cities in other states began reviewing their own stop policies. Several departments quietly dropped bonus programs. And for the first time in a long time, people began to believe that change might actually follow the tragedy. Meanwhile, Clara refused to let Elijah be remembered only for how he died. She released pieces of his unfinished audit online sections showing data breakdowns, memos highlighting red flags, graphs that made one thing painfully clear: black drivers were stopped more often, searched more aggressively, and ticketed at rates no statistical logic could explain. And officers, who made the most stops, they got promoted. The numbers didn't lie. Elijah had been close to blowing something open. And now, in his name, Clara was finishing what he started. News outlets called her a widow. She corrected them. We weren't married yet, but we had plans. We had a daughter to raise. And now I'm raising her with a mission. In one interview, when asked if she blamed the officer, she didn't blink. I blame her words cut through the usual noise. She didn't speak like a politician. She spoke like someone who had nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for. That made her dangerous to the system and powerful to everyone else. The night before Elijah's memorial, Clara sat on the steps outside her apartment, Naya asleep in her arms. She looked up at the sky and whispered what she couldn't say in the church. "You trusted numbers, but I believe in people, and I won't stop until both agree this shouldn't have happened." What Elijah began with spreadsheets, Clara continued with a voice. Together, they were reshaping the way Riverview and maybe the whole country talked about justice. In the months that followed Elijah Merrick's death, Riverview became more than a dot on a map. It became a mirror held up to a country long overdue for reflection. The image wasn't pretty, but it was honest. The investigation into the police department moved quickly once the governor authorized a full-scale review. Internal memos surfaced, revealing that Elijah's audit had been closer to the truth than anyone had guessed. Some officers had received thousands in bonus payouts tied directly to traffic stop numbers. The pattern showed disproportionate targeting of minority drivers, especially in neighborhoods with high black populations, and low complaint follow-through. Some called it data-driven enforcement. Others called it what it was, a quota system with a badge. Body cam footage from other officers began to paint a broader picture, not just of the night Elijah was shot, but of how Riverview PD operated daily. Officers referring to certain areas as hunting grounds, jokes about fishing for fines, and worst of all, commentary that revealed deep racial bias spoken casually, like weather talk. In one clip, an officer said, "They're always packing something, so you gotta act first." The phrase was chilling, especially knowing Elijah never reached, never resisted, and still didn't survive. The Merrick Transparency Task Force, originally assembled as a temporary measure, was made permanent. They conducted an independent review of Riverview's last 5 years of traffic stops, citations, and use of force cases. The results forced resignations. 12 officers stepped down, 3 were fired, and 1, Officer Travis Brenner, was formally charged with second-degree manslaughter. No immunity, no internal cover. The DA stood at the podium and said it plainly. Fear is not an excuse for lethal force when there is no threat. Elijah Merrick followed every rule, and he was still killed. That is not law enforcement. That is failure. It was a rare moment, a prosecutor holding an officer accountable, but it didn't bring Elijah back. Clara knew that. Everyone did. Justice doesn't reverse loss. It only acknowledges it, formally, publicly, and painfully. When the Merrick Accountability Act passed 6 months later, it marked a turning point. The law banned performance-based enforcement quotas across the state. It also mandated public release of all body cam footage within 72 hours after any fatal police encounter, expanded funding for independent civilian review boards, and created protections for government whistleblowers within law enforcement and city departments. Elijah's name was on the bill, in every headline, in every courtroom that used his case as precedent. But more than that, his spirit echoed in smaller places, training seminars, school discussions, church meetings. Young public servants who once questioned their impact now saw Elijah's story and said, "That's the kind of work I want to do." He didn't die a martyr. He died doing his job. The tragedy was real, but the legacy was louder. Clara continued speaking, but not as a victim. She became the face of a foundation. The Merrick Initiative, offering scholarships to students in law, public policy, and criminal justice who aimed to fix systems from the inside, She toured colleges, stood on debate stages, sat with legislators, always calm, always clear, and always pointing back to the moment her life split in two when a man doing everything right still didn't make it home. Officer Brenner's trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. The verdict, guilty. He was sentenced to 12 years. During sentencing, Clara read a statement. No tears, no hate, just truth. You weren't the only one responsible, but you were the one with the gun. You had the power to pause, to breathe, to see the man in front of you. But you didn't. And now, because of that, my daughter will grow up remembering her father through a video. After court, reporters asked her what justice meant to her now. She answered without hesitating. It's not about one verdict. It's about whether the next Elijah makes it home. And for once, that idea didn't feel impossible. Police academies across the state added a new segment to their curriculum: the Merrick case compliance, communication, and consequence. Recruits were required to watch both videos, the dash cam and Clara's live stream, and then write a reflection. Not for a grade, for understanding. Cities outside Minnesota began following suit. Reform packages were proposed in multiple states, some citing the Merrick Act as model legislation. Elijah's audit, once a quiet stack of spreadsheets, had become a national conversation about ethics, data, and the human cost of fear-based policing. The story ended where it began, in Clara's living room. 1 year later, Naya stood in front of a small crowd at a community memorial. She wore a blue ribbon in her hair and held her mother's hand. The microphone barely reached her chin, but when she spoke, she didn't flinch. "My daddy helped people," she said. "He looked at papers and made sure the rules were fair. Now Mommy does that too." The crowd stood in silence, many wiping tears, as the child stepped down and sat beside her mother. No applause, just quiet resolve. Because the truth is, stories like Elijah's shouldn't need to exist. But when they do, they deserve to be told. Fully, honestly, and in a way that moves people to act, not just feel. Elijah Merrick believed systems could be better, that government could serve, that truth could fix what bias breaks. And though he didn't live to see the change he worked for, he forced it to begin. That is the story we remember, not because it comforts us, but because it dares us to ask better questions, demand better answers, and build a world where someone like Elijah doesn't have to explain his intentions just to stay alive.